Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to Abnormal Voyages. My name is David, and today we find ourselves in San Diego, California. Now, if you're interested in any manner of geeky things, San Diego probably means one thing to you: San Diego Comic-Con. Started in 1970, this is where the very first Comic-Con happened that kicked it off and became the cultural phenomenon that it is today. The con isn't happening right now, but recently opened in 2021, we have the Comic-Con Museum, which explores the entire history and celebrates pop culture. Let's go check it out. Come tag along.
We're going to a place that you've never heard of before. It's Abnormal Voyages. You're gonna learn something new. We're gonna open new doors. It's Abnormal Voyages.
Now, Comic-Con may have began being all about comics and comic books, but not too far away from that is cartoons. We're lucky enough to be here at the Animation Academy, where they're going to show us how these simple one-page drawings become amazing cartoon features. And we've got some familiar favorite faces to help us along the way.
And here's one of those familiar faces right now. Good old Gumby. We'll come back to him in a minute, but always nice to see him here saying hello. Now, of course, animation has a lot of different features in it. Here are some simple gestures and emotions that can go into your animated characters. And this is a little bit of a roadmap to what goes into an animated feature. You start out here, you're doing pencil test, your concept, until eventually you get all the way to the end where you have a fully realized animation. Now, the origins of animations looked a lot different than what we have today. These are still really cool. I love the retro feel of them. They definitely spotlighted Gertie the dinosaur as well. She was the very first animated character to really show emotion. Now, this was still in the silent film era, so there was only music and she didn't have noise, but boy did she have emotions and character. As a matter of fact, cartoons back then were done on a lot of different mediums.
Now, the road to getting to animated cartoons the way we see them today is a pretty long one. There was a lot of different things along the way. Here's some examples of devices that were used to kind of simulate that animated feel. This is the Praxinoscope, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. You hit this, and it spins. If you look at the mirrored image, all of the drawings on the bottom that are rotating actually look like they're doing a moving image. Up here, we have the Magic Lantern. This is one of the first things that was used to create movies, basically. They could have a long slide that they literally would pull through, and each image would go fast enough that it showed an animated feature. Then, of course, one that everybody's familiar with, flip books. We have one right up here. Again, it was several images that would rotate through really fast, and it would show little cartoon drawings as if they were moving. Then we have this, the Camera Lucida. This one was another device that you actually looked into, and you could look into a device that kind of put them together. Let's see if we can, very old. This is one of the original ones here. And then the stereoscope. This one took two images, and when you looked through it, it kind of put them together, so you almost got like a 3D image. So we'll hit that, and there's an example of it right there. So as you can see, you had a lot of different options, but none quite as good as what we have now.
The exhibit then explains a little bit further about some of the pieces that we just saw in the display case and shows you some more examples of what the animation styles looked like on these older devices. They even had one set up that was pretty popular in the day. You could insert a coin into this machine and then watch the flip book inside. You could crank it there and see a little cartoon just for yourself. However, these did tend to be a little more adult in nature. But from these humble origins, we began to get our first pop culture icons such as Felix the Cat, Betty Boop, and Popeye the Sailor Man. People loved having these characters showing up over and over again, and of course, Mickey Mouse, one of my personal favorites, and he spawned the cartoon merchandise line. Mickey is probably the most represented character in all of merchandise. Everybody has to have a Mickey Mouse watch sometime in their life, and there was plenty of other things with his adorable face on them. Now, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the first animated movie, and from there they just got better and better. We had Woody the Woodpecker come along, who is still a great mascot to this day. This is one of the cameras they would use for some of that older animation, sticking the animated drawing in there, taking a picture, and then moving on to the next one. These are very complicated looking, lots of buttons and switches. Crazy to think that we have simplified this so much from back then. Now, after the war, animation really took off. There were a lot of new characters, new ideas. People were fresh from having some really bad times, and they wanted something to escape into. Cartoons happened to be just one of those awesome escapes, ready to bring people fantastic stories. This is where we got beloved characters such as Fred Flintstone and his best buddy Barney Rubble. Yogi Bear showed up with Boo Boo, always in pursuit of those picnic baskets. And then, who can forget that most lovable paranormal investigator, Scooby-Doo.
As we've seen, cartoons are simply a picture done thousands of times with little changes and then strung together to look like motion. To really show this, they even have a center here where you can draw whatever you'd like, change it a little bit, take a picture, change it, take a picture, and so on to make it look like movement. As we see, I have this little guy here, and I designed a little movie creating him. Let me push play. And there you go. Just like that, you can have your own little cartoon.
As time-consuming as this process was, the importance of storyboarding could not be overstated. They really needed a clear vision of what exactly was going to happen in this cartoon and how it was going to look. This is still something that animators use every day. Somebody who knew all about animation and storyboarding was Art Clokey. His influence on the world of animation is very far-reaching, and you can see some of the examples here. And of course, what Art is most famous for is inventing Gumby, who we saw a little earlier at the beginning. Gumby brought with him a slightly different form of animation, which was stop motion. This took the same basic principles of having an image, changing it a little bit, taking a picture, changing it, taking a picture, but instead of being drawn on paper, Gumby and his friends existed in a 3D world. They were actually made of clay and physically there to be moved just a little bit for each of their motions. There were lots of characters that existed in this medium. Gumby wasn't the only star, but he is one of the crowd favorites. And he's actually looked a little different throughout the years. We have a evolution of Gumby here. You can definitely tell that it was the same guy, but he's changed a little bit. Let's take a little closer look at stop motion.
Now, we saw how it works with typical animation with the drawings, but now that we've gone into stop motion, I wanted to show you how similar the process is. We have another station where they're actually going to let us create our own little animated feature. So first we're going to pick a background. We got a lot of choices here. We got a park. There's like a desert. I think we're going to stick with this street scene here. The Barber of Seville. That sounds all right. And then let's get some characters. We'll get our main man Gumby here. We'll stick him there. And you know what? We'll go with Mr. Bill. Everybody likes Mr. Bill. So we're going to place them here on our set as it was. And if you look at the screen, turn around right here, this is kind of how we have our starting. And from this, we're going to have a scene where they just kind of come up to each other and high five. So what we do very much like how we did the different drawings, we're going to take them and move them. We're going to take our starting picture, and then we're going to move them ever so slightly. So Mr. Bill will go here. Gumby is going to move a little bit this way. We'll take that picture, and then it's just a matter of slowly moving them to give you that motion. There we go. And you got to kind of move their bodies so they don't just kind of glide across. It's got to look like they're actually taking steps towards each other. Do another one there. Move them over. Try that. Okay. Let me get Mr. Bill positioned the right way. Gumby's going to step with that foot. All right. And just a little bit more. We'll take that. Go here. Gumby will be like that. And you know what? It's kind of looking more like they're gonna hug. Let's see if we can get them into the. All right. So now they're seeing each other. So he's gonna turn. He's looking. All right. They're looking right at each other. Let's see if Mr. Bill's hand can go up at all. It doesn't look like it does. You know what? They're gonna do a brotherly hug. So we're gonna go right there. They're gonna bring it in. Move a little bit more. There we go. And right into each other. And then we're gonna wrap this arm right here, bring it down. And we'll do one more picture like that. And look at that. Either best friends or who knows, maybe long lost lovers, scandalously brought together. Let's check out how it ended up. Here we go. Let's watch the screen. We're going to hit play. Look at that. I think they're about to kiss. That didn't quite go how we wanted, but you know what? We helped two lovers find each other today. Who could ask for more than that?
While the original stop motion figures were made out of clay, advances in technology have made it a little easier with things such as 3D printing. They're able to create exact figures in pretty much any design you want them. However, when it comes to character design, clay is still one of the preferred mediums, and even in something that is going to be created in a digital space, artists tend to like having a physical representation first. Speaking of digital, that is absolutely where animated features have gone now, which started with Toy Story. This was the first computer-animated feature film, and I think it's safe to say we all loved it. But my heart is always going to belong to the traditional 2D drawings. There's just something about the ability to put a pencil or pen to paper and making an entire world come to life. This is definitely helped out by digital age today, however, so they look really sharp and fantastic. But we have a lot to thank with Chuck Jones and the crew who made Looney Tunes, one of the greatest animated series of all time. So it's great to remember the roots of where this all started.
End of the world. So long, folks, and remember, you heard it first.
Personally, I've always loved cartoons ever since growing up with Saturday morning cartoons. It's kind of amazing that all this pop culture started with something as simple as a pencil. Well, before I get too caught up in these, let's go see what else the museum has.
Comic-Con is all about celebrating pop culture and the fandoms that we love. Here are some unique art pieces, all created out of cardboard by passionate fans. We have Groot standing nice and tall, very impressive, almost as impressive as this Hulkbuster Iron Man. Crazy that this is made just out of cardboard. We also have C-3PO and R2-D2, a little bit of sci-fi thrown in there. And then Baby Yoda, this is Grogu, very cute. And then a bunch of smaller ones in the display case. It's awesome to see what people can create just because they love something so much.
As I mentioned, Comic-Con has been going on for over 50 years. It started in 1970, and they certainly wanted to celebrate some of that history. So here at Cover Story, we're specifically looking at program books. This one next to me is from the very first Comic-Con. This is back when it was called the San Diego Golden State Comic-Con. It was only a one-day event as opposed to the multiple days that it is now, and this is what it looked like. It's got a nice picture of Balboa Park, probably the most popular thing in the area at that time, and it invited everybody to come celebrate comics, sci-fi, and film. Every year since then, they've had a new program book that's told you a little bit about what to expect at the convention, and every year has also brought really cool art for the program book. So here we're going to take a look back and see some of the favorites throughout those years.
When Comic-Con first began, I doubt many people that attended those first few knew how big of a deal this would become in years to come. So, there's not really a lot of original programs kept in pristine condition, but it's awesome that they've managed to track down these ones and have them here. Now, opposed to the program itself, a lot of this is actually the original art that was replicated for the programs. But there are a handful that are the actual programs themselves, the ones that were handed out as attendees eagerly rushed through the doors. This exhibit is broken up into different eras, such as the 1980s here, which is the Silver Age. For those familiar with comics, you will notice that they've kind of gone after the Silver Years, the Golden Age, things like that to kind of describe the Comic-Con. And of course, I think that's very appropriate, as at the very beginning, this was all to celebrate comics. Comics are still a huge part of what goes on at San Diego Comic-Con. It just happens to have expanded a bit to encompass all sorts of fandoms. But at its heart, the comics are still there, just as strong as ever. And while this is still the kind of granddaddy of all comic conventions, they now take place all over the world. It turns out there are quite a few people out there who all love and appreciate these same sort of things that can't make it to California every year. So, cons now happen in huge and small cities all over the country. If you've never been to one before, I highly suggest you check one out the next time it comes to town. As we work our way through the years of the comic convention happening, you kind of get an idea of what the pop culture world was like at the time, what was important to them, what was popular, what really appealed to the general public. It's almost like a mini time capsule of geekdom culture. Really neat to start at the beginning and go through seeing the ways that they changed and the ways that Comic-Con was represented to people as a whole. If you wanted to, you could absolutely take a couple of hours just strolling through the different years and really thinking about what it's representing and what it's saying about that year in history. Unfortunately, we don't have time to do that right now, but when you happen to visit this museum, make sure you stop by. Now come on, we got more to see.
Something that's become a big part of Comic-Con is anime. And one of the most popular animes right now, plus one of my personal favorites, is My Hero Academia. In this little section, they honor this anime by teaching you a little bit about the different characters and their quirks, which is their name for superpowers in this world. And then the highlight of this room is this awesome statue over here, which was one of the defining episodes of the anime, where All Might versed All for One in a very epic battle.
As a matter of fact, anime has become such a huge thing that they have complete anime conventions of their own, including one here in California, a massive one every year called Anime Expo. It is very plus ultra.
A huge name in pop culture, and somebody that was basically the king of Comic-Con. He was at almost every single one up until his death, and he is somebody that is one of my heroes that I personally got to meet, and I feel honored that I was, Stan Lee. He created some of the most amazing heroes out there in the world, such as Spider-Man, the X-Men, the list goes on and on and on. They have a whole section here that is dedicated to celebrating his legacy. So let's go see what we can find out.
Before we dive in too deep on specifically Stan Lee, we want to honor the entire Marvel bullpen. There were lots of great minds that came together to create the Marvel Universe, and though he gets a lot of the press, Stan Lee was not the only genius behind this world. But that being said, he very well may be the most beloved of the creators. Stan Lee was born in New York City in 1922. For his entire life, from a young child onward, Stan loved telling stories. He always considered himself a writer and was always eager to get his words out there in front of people to entertain them and make the world a little more interesting of a place. As a young man, he found an opportunity to use his writing skills and began working on a little comic called Captain America. Now, he did not create Captain America, but it was some of his earliest works. Seeing the great job he was doing opened up doors for him to work on other books that were currently being published. So this led to stories in things like Strange Tales and Journey into Mystery. These comics weren't about a specific character, but had different kind of sci-fi stories or horror stories depending on which comic they were. A lot of your more famous characters now actually started in small books like this, such as Ant-Man and Tales to Astonish, or Tales of Suspense. We have a man made out of iron. Yes, this is where Iron Man comes from. Or Journey into Mystery with a very familiar looking God of Thunder. But of course, the real hero, my personal favorite, Spider-Man, coming out of Amazing Fantasy number 15. These heroes would become Stan Lee's legacy. He created these beloved characters, and they really took on lives of their own. Iron Man got his own stories. The Amazing Spider-Man, of course, got his own series. And all of his characters just began becoming huge cultural icons. He created the Fantastic Four, who is Marvel's first family. They've been around for forever, and they're still coming out with new movies to this day. The Incredible Hulk, everyone knows about Bruce Banner and his slight anger management issues. And it wasn't long before his characters all began working together in a little group called the Avengers. And the Avengers were not the only team around, as Stan Lee also created the X-Men. With incredible characters and stories like this, it's really no surprise that Stan Lee himself kind of became a superhero. He became one of the characters that he loved to write about so much. He brought us this magnificent world of Marvel, and truly, the world will never be the same as it was before he and his crew came onto the scene.
It's safe to say that without Stan Lee, the world would be without many of its iconic heroes. Thank you, Stan. But speaking of icons, we still have plenty more to see. Come on. Now, you can't talk about Comic-Con without mentioning cosplay. Comic-Con has a massive event that they call the Comic-Con Masquerade, which is basically a cosplay competition, and people in San Diego take it very seriously. This display walks us through some of the winners over the past, and these things blow me away. I've always enjoyed cosplay. I have a lot of respect for anybody that does it. Some of the things they come up with are simply stunning, and these are no exception. A lot of these honestly look like they jumped straight out of the movies. It's crazy to think that people made this on their own at home, in their garages, in their spare bedrooms, and all the passion that goes into these is just incredible. I really like this Superman here. This definitely looks like it came out of the movie. Now, personally, I have always been a big Marvel fan, so while I appreciate things like this beautiful Batman, I really like this Captain America and Doctor Strange. And I mean, come on, does this not look like it came right out of the movie? That is so cool. You can also read a little bit about the winners here, the years that they entered, and kind of what materials went into it, but definitely very neat. And if you ever make it out to Comic-Con, pay attention to the cosplay, because it's awesome. And like any good event, Comic-Con has to have an amazing mascot. Luckily, they do. I'd like to introduce you to the Comic-Con Toucan.
Now, this particular mascot has kind of an interesting story behind him. He was created by Rick Geary, who was a Comic-Con attendee. He had some friends who helped run Comic-Con, and they asked him at one point, "Hey, you're a professional illustrator. How about making us a mascot as kind of a Comic-Con ambassador?" And of course he said, absolutely. So in the 1980s, he drew up the wonderful toucan that we see today. Now the toucan's name is simply that, Toucan. Now, when they asked Geary to create this mascot, they really didn't have any instructions for him. He pretty much had free reign to design whatever he wanted, but that meant he needed some inspiration. And that inspiration came from another famous San Diego location, the San Diego Zoo. While he was there, he met a Toko toucan that was very chatty and had a very bright orange beak. Next thing you knew, he was ready to create the mascot and landed on this lovable, very adorable toucan character. Toucan would remain as the official logo for Comic-Con for more than a decade, but was replaced in 1995 by the very famous eyeball with a very heavy brow. But people love Toucan so much that he still sticks around and makes appearances on things every year, even having a couple Funko Pops made exclusively of him and available at the convention. Quite a collector's item.
And with that, we've come to an end of our Comic-Con museum adventure. But don't worry, we will definitely be visiting other Comic-Cons in the future, and who knows, maybe we'll even check out Comic-Con here in San Diego before too long. Well, my name is David, and this has been Abnormal Voyages. If you enjoyed this, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and then comment below where you'd like to see us next. And if you really want to help support us, you can check out our Patreon, which will also be linked below, where you can sign up to get awesome things such as a postcard in the mail every single month. Thanks for tagging along. We'll see you next time.